What you may not know is that I'm a certified equine massage therapist, and I've actually had a lot of people request a video about doing massages on a horse. So I will give a disclaimer. Doing a proper full body massage on a horse is very technical, and you do have to go through training to understand how the horse's body works and their different muscle groups and things like that. So what I'm going to do today is I'm just going to share some really simple techniques you can do with your horse just to help them release tension in their body and help them relieve stress. And as always, consult with a vet if you have any questions about techniques or procedures to do with your horse. Just some things to note: when you're doing these techniques, what you're doing is warming up the muscle and loosening up the muscle. So you're going to use different pressure at different increments. I just want to walk you through that pressure. You're always going to start with a light pressure. And so what light pressure is really is if you just imagine laying your hand on your arm. You know, you're not really squeezing or doing anything like that. You're just laying your hand there. That's light pressure. For a medium pressure, I like to think of it as if I'm taking my finger and I'm kind of just resting my hand on my arm through my finger. That's more of a medium pressure. A hard pressure is more so where you're kind of pushing down more and envision yourself pushing through the muscle. That's kind of what a hard pressure is. When you're doing these techniques, you're always going to start with a light pressure. Then you're gradually going to increase to a medium pressure, and then you're going to go to a hard pressure. So just keep that in mind as we're doing this. Is it just me, or who else likes to know when something is working? So as you're doing these techniques, there are indications that your horse is releasing tension and releasing stress in their body. These may look like your horse chewing or licking, even yawning. Another one is they may stretch their neck down, or anything like that. These techniques may also feel good to your horse. So signs that your horse is feeling good is they'll stretch their head up in the air, and they may bob their head, or they'll even like stick their lips out. So those are good signs that your horse is enjoying the massage. Signs that your horse is really sensitive in an area as you do these techniques would include the horse flinching at the pressure. Another one would be the horse puts their ears back and maybe looks at you, and they're like, "What are you doing back there?" Flicking their tail, moving away. So if you go and you place your hand on them and they move away from you, that could indicate that area is sensitive. And lastly, any behavior kind of threatening of like, "Okay, you need to get away from me," and they may pick up their foot and just let you know that that area is sensitive. So always be in tune and see what your horse is communicating as you're doing these techniques. If your horse does have an area that they start reacting sensitively to, you can always decrease the pressure. So if you're applying hard pressure and the horse is starting to show signs of sensitivity, always go back to the medium or light pressure. The exercises I've come up with for you today target the areas your horse usually carries the most tension. And so we'll also just walk through those areas as we go through this video. So we're going to start at the head and just work our way back and go through the body. The part I'm going to start with is the horse's jaw. So horses are like us, where if they're really concentrated or they may be getting stressed, they tend to clench their jaw. Horses also carry a bit in their mouth, which can cause them to clench their jaw in different ways. So I know when I'm clenching my jaw for a long time, like if I'm concentrating, sometimes it gives me a headache. So I know when I have a headache, I usually massage my temples. And it just relaxes me a little bit. So I'm going to do the same thing to my horse here, to Tucker. You can come right under this bone here, kind of back from the eye, kind of right under the horse's ear. Like you could draw a straight line down, and you can just put your fingers there and apply pressure. And I'm just doing a light pressure. I'm just laying my fingers there. And you can see, he's like, "What are you doing to me?" Sometimes horses don't understand the pressure to begin with, but I'll just leave the light pressure, and then I'm just going to increase to a medium pressure here. That's really all that is you're just keeping your fingers there in that spot and creating pressure. And with this, you want to really stick to a light pressure or maybe a little medium pressure, but we don't have to go harder than that. Now he's kind of accepted the pressure and he's not flicking his head or fighting it. And a lot of horses, when you do this, they're going to drop their head like that. That's a good indication that they're relieving tension and stress and they're relaxing. We're at the horse's neck now, and a horse's neck just naturally carries a lot of tension. Horses were actually designed to have their heads down for most of the time grazing and eating. So the fact that lifestyle changes over time to where now when horses get ridden, we have their heads up. And if they're in their stall and they're eating out of their hay net, their head is up. And so their neck is in an upward position much more than it was initially designed to be. So that just causes a lot of tension through the neck. The technique I'm going to show you isn't necessarily aimed at muscles, just because the neck is technical, you got the spine going through here. This is more aimed at lymph nodes. Horses have lymph nodes like humans, and so this massage is just going to work to create circulation with the lymph nodes and help your horse drain down as you're supposed to. But this is also really relaxing to horses and humans and any other animal. It's a great way to release stress and relieve stress. So if you look at the horse's neck, you can see a groove right here. So all I'm going to do is just take my hand and just starting right under the ear here, I can just run my hand down the neck in that groove. And you can just repeatedly do this. I'm going to start with a light pressure. Hey! And I'm going to gradually increase my pressure. And you can go all the way down to the chest. So now we're at the horse's withers. And the withers is an area that a horse carries a lot of tension. Even if your saddle fits correctly, you know, there's still pressure here of where you're sitting and things like that. So this area usually will have some sensitivity. Another thing is, like we mentioned earlier, a horse carries their head in a more upright position compared to what they were initially designed to do. And so if that neck is up, this muscle is just going to be contracting a lot more. So it can get sensitive through here as well. So here's the shoulder blade. So we're going to kind of work around the shoulder blade. But personally, the easiest thing to do here, and I find a lot of horses love, is just scratching the withers. So up here, and then it kind of gets wider as you go down. And you can start with a light scratch, and this is Tucker's favorite. I'll just lightly scratch, and then I can go a more medium scratch. Oh, and you can see he likes this. Oh yeah. And then once I've done this and warmed up the muscle a little bit, then I can really just take the palm of my hand and the heel of my hand and just rub and scratch, scratch, scratch. But every horse loves this. I haven't found a horse that doesn't like this. So even if your horse doesn't show emotion, you can still do this because it's just warming up the muscle and loosening the muscle. And you can really just knead with your fingers. The next section we're going to focus on is the back, or the top line. So horses carry a lot of tension in their back as well, and that's because, number one, their back has to support this giant body. Number two, they're ridden, and so that's not initially a thing horses were designed to have done to them. So that just will create tension back here. Even if your saddle fits, there still usually will be some sensitivity back here. One thing I will say about the back is if your horse is very sensitive and reactive back here to pressure, so to where like they're dropping their back, trying to avoid the pressure, that could be a sign of poor saddle fit, could be a sign of kind of the hips being out of alignment or out of place, kissing spine. There may just be different things that will cause your horse to react that severely. So keep that in mind. If your horse is reacting like that, I would have a vet look at your horse. But if it's just normal sensitivity where maybe they flinch a little bit, but they're not dropping their back trying to avoid the pressure, that's pretty normal. So with this, what I personally like to do is if you have your curry comb, all you're going to do is curry in circles along the back. And you can do a light pressure, start light pressure. And I'm not going all the way to the spine. I'm staying about 1 inch to 2 inches away from the spine. And then from there, we can do a medium pressure. And it's just warming up the muscle and loosening up those muscles. And then from there, I'll go do a hard pressure. And so it acts the exact same as a massage, really, where you're just working the muscle. And you can just incorporate it into your brushing. So you can see there, Tucker likes that. So now we're at the hip. See this groove right here? All I do is I just take my hand and run it up that groove, and he immediately starts yawning when I do that. You can start with a light pressure, and I'm pushing just all the way up, and then I'll go to a medium pressure, and then I can kind of go more into a harder pressure, sticking my fingers in there. So super simple, super easy to do. And you could even just do that before each ride. The next thing we're going to move on to is the horse's hamstrings. So the next few points I'm going to go over are areas that I feel like go really overlooked in terms of our grooming routine. And so that means these muscles and areas aren't getting touched or worked gently so that they're getting warm, they're releasing tension. And so for me personally, when I'm grooming my horse, I like to target these next areas just because I think it's so important to be able to relieve tension in those areas that are going overlooked. For this point, I'm going to talk about the hamstrings. With, our hamstrings run like this, horses' hamstrings run down here. Just like with a human, the hamstrings are going to help the horse extend and move their leg. And so if your horse's hamstrings are tight, that means their stifles and their hocks are going to be tight and they're not going to be able to move as freely. So we really want to make sure that this area back here is loose. One simple, easy exercise I personally like to do is starting up at the base of the horse's tail. I just like to scratch back and forth. And I can go down the horse's butt cheek all the way to kind of like the base of the leg. And I'll just go back up. And a lot of horses like this too. And you can start increasing the pressure. I'll do more of a medium. And it's a good sign if your horse is moving their tail like that. That means that tail is loosening. If a horse has a tight tail where it's just kind of clamped, that's a good indication that the hamstrings may be tight. And so you can just loosen that up and scratch, scratch, scratch. The next area we're going to work on is the hock, which is this joint right here. And I will say it's a good idea to do the hamstring exercise before the hock exercise, just because it's warming up this tendon here, so then it's going to be easier for the hock to be warmed up. So really what I want to try and do is just kind of loosen up the areas around this joint so it becomes easier for the joint to function. So kind of at the base of his butt cheek right here, what I can do is just kind of the same thing with the hamstring, but I'm just going to do it a little bit more deliberately and slow, is I can just rub back and forth right here, and I can even take my hand more to the inside of the leg, but I'm just going to be slow, and I'm going to use like a light to medium pressure and just encourage that to loosen up. And I can even kind of go up the leg a little bit, but I'm going inside the leg and rubbing out. So once I've done that, what I personally like to do is to take my fingers and go on either side of this bone right here, this tendon, and I can just run my fingers down the muscle that's on either side of the leg, and I can do light, then I'll do medium, and even maybe hard pressure, but I'll just stay right there, and only rub down, don't rub up. If you rub your fingers down here, you'll eventually hit kind of like a groove where it feels like there's nothing under there. So in that spot, I can just hold my fingers. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to hold them lightly, and that'll just work to loosen that area. The next joint we're going to focus on is the stifle, which is right here. And so once again, I do recommend doing the hamstring and the hock, and then we'll do the stifle. With this, a lot of people don't even know this is a joint. It is. And what you can do with this, I just take my curry comb, and kind of at that point, you can just rub. And you can do clockwise, and I'll do a light, and then I can increase to medium, and then I'll do more of a hard pressure. And so once I've done that, and the outside muscle here, then I can take my hand, and be careful doing this, because horses rarely get touched in this area. And you can go inside of this point, and I can just kind of massage with my hand and kind of rub my hand in a circle on that muscle that's behind this joint. And it may not seem like much, but if you're able to loosen the muscles around a joint, that really helps the joint work. If the muscle is contracted and stiff, the joint is really going to have to fight against that to move. And so by working the muscles around the joint, that should help. Yeah. I have a big announcement I also want to share today, which is we just launched a lunging course, a how to lunge your horse, and it walks you step by step how to lunge your horse, how to get started, but also how to troubleshoot some problems you may be having with your horse when it comes to lunging. So lunging relates to basically every other area of horse training. I'll put the link in the description for you to check that out, and you can also go to shop.equinehelper.com. So try some of these techniques on your horse and let me know how it goes. You can email us or comment on this video. I'd love to know how these are working. But if you got anything out of this video, please be sure to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more weekly horse videos.